Hello YouTube, it is Qnix. I am here to show you the tutorial for applying the Game Boy Color effect to a video. Now this can be thought of as sort of the sequel to the Game Boy Color effect. With the Game Boy Color effect, I'm trying to make a logo look like it's being displayed on a Game Boy screen, so I set the resolution really low. I use a color palette that's only a series of 4 different greens, and I apply a pixelated audio effect so that it has a very retro feel. The Game Boy Color is a little bit different. I was looking up a list of color schemes that, or not color schemes, but color formats that exist. I've been getting more interested in color palettes since I've discovered the palette gen and palette use effects in FFmpeg, or I guess rediscovered them because I knew about it before, but not all of its capabilities. And what I found about the Game Boy Color is that the Game Boy Color actually has a huge variety of colors available to it. It has all of the colors in a 15-bit RGB space. So there's 5 different levels, sorry, not 5 different levels. There is 2 to the 5th, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. There's 32 possible levels. It's right here. Why don't I just read? There's 32 possible levels of each color, red, green, or blue. Now, because there's 32 of those, but they can be combined, that means there's 32 times 32 times 32, which equals 32,768 possible colors that can be represented on a Game Boy Color. However, only 56 colors can be displayed simultaneously. We can see that on the Game Boy Advance, and at the other models it's 512 colors, but just to verify that that's what it says here, tech specs. Does it say, okay, so the frame rate, it says, yeah, color support. 32,768 colors up to 56 simultaneously. The frame rate is just about 60 Hertz. Now, otherwise, the screen is quite similar to the Game Boy's. It is 60 by 144 pixels. So what we're doing here is we're going to be applying the Game Boy effect, but we're going to be doing a more complicated procedure to get the color. So this is not easy to write down on a piece of paper. I think it's much easier to just show you. But luckily for you, it is very similar in a lot of respects to the Game Boy Color effect. And the audio effect is just the same as the one that I've been using for Game Boy videos. I'll link that separately. But I'm going to be walking you through all the steps to make a video look like it's going to be on the Game Boy. Now, before we begin, I just want to say that a good idea for a video to apply this effect to is a logo with a decent variety of colors. You don't necessarily have to have a bunch of crazy colors, but you want it to have a good, you want it to have different hues, different lightnesses, different saturations, etc. Because the limitations on the color won't really mean a lot if you don't have a lot of colors to begin with. So the last video that I used was the Questar Home Video effect, which I thought would be a good candidate because it had blue, red, orange, and yellow. But I think maybe a better candidate would be the Random House Home Video logo, and that's what I'm going to be using today. So let me just view the original logo before I get into anything. So we've got a mostly purple background. White, black, and every shade of the rainbow do show up in the logo itself. So the first step is we are going to crop and resize the video. Now I say crop because a lot of old logos have artifacts on the outer edges that we don't necessarily want. That's not necessarily important if you don't want to apply that, but I am going to apply that to be safe. Also, we are going to set the frame rate to 60 seconds. So this first step is just pre-processing. This is getting the video to the right size and the right frame rate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to FFmpeg my original, and I will apply some video filters, the -VF. I'm going to, it'd probably be easier if I rescale it first, because then everything else, no, I'll crop it first, yeah. I'll do crop equals W equals 0.95 times IW, and H equals 0.95 times IH. I think I might add zeros there. So this command means I'm going to trim down the video so that I'm cutting off a total of 5% of the border. The new width is going to be 95% of the old width. The new height is going to be 95% of the old height. And FFmpeg is going to take care of centering it for us, so we don't need to worry about that. Then I will scale it. I'll say the width is 160, and the height is 144. And you could potentially get a better looking video if you did some additional cropping so that you fit a better aspect ratio. You know what? Could I do that? Let me do a little test here. I'll do scale equals W equals -1 and H equals 144. Then I'll crop so that the width is 160. Let's see what this looks like. You know what, that actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to do something a little different. Now, just to be clear, that improvisation, I didn't mean to derail people. It's just each logo is going to be different. Sometimes you can get away with cropping away a lot more of the logo to fit the unorthodox aspect ratio we're going for. Other times there's important data at the edges, so you don't want to do that. You may have to stretch it instead. For today's video, I'm going to do cropping because it looks like I'm not going to be cutting off anything important if I just crop. So, we're going to FFmpeg the original. VF is going to be our video filters. I'll still do the cropping of the outer edges. IH equals 0.95 times, H equals 0.95 times IH. So this is just getting rid of a little bit of the edges. Then I'm going to scale. W equals -1 and H equals 144. Now what this means is that we're going to set the height to 144, and the -1 means we're going to let FFmpeg automatically decide what width the video should be so that the aspect ratio is preserved and the height is 144. Then I'm going to crop, again, equals W equals 160. So get rid of the borders, scale it down to a height of 144, and then crop it to a width of 160. Now, you may decide to use, you may decide to stretch the video instead of cropping the video like I've done. You may also find it easier to manually crop or stretch the video in Kdenlive before setting it to this size. But it can be a little bit faster if you do everything with FFmpeg. What's really important is that our video at the end is going to have a height of 144 and a width of 160. Whether you do that by scaling or cropping, just get to that size. Then we're going to interpolate so that the frame rate is 60. Now, I'll show you the settings I usually use when I'm looking for the highest quality. So the MI mode, motion interpolation mode, will be MCI, motion compensated interpolation. She sells seashells. MC mode, motion compensation mode, equals AOBMC. I don't remember what the O means, but A means adaptive. So this adjusts some parameters depending on the motion of the video to make it higher quality. ME mode, motion estimation mode, equals BIDR. So we're looking at how the video changes in multiple directions to get a better estimate of how the motion should change. And then VSBMC, variable size block, equals 1, also allows the motion compensation to adjust with the video. I'll set, just to be easier on me, I'll set the pixel format to RGB 24. I do recommend doing this, there's no harm in it. S160 by 144 -R60, scale and crop dot. Oh, and I almost forgot, the frame rate will be 60, and the video codec is going to be FFV1, because we don't want to lose any information. FFV1 is a lossless codec, so we're going to want to use that as much as we can. Or, even better, we can do all of the FFmpeg shenanigans in a single line, which I will show you at the end of this. And we're going to call this scale and crop .mkv. Lastly, before I run this, I'll do -an. I'm only looking at the video effect today because I've already gone through a tutorial for the audio effect. So let's give this a render. Let's see why it didn't like that. Oh, whoopsie, typo. And that pixel format should be fine. We'll take a look when it's done rendering. But yeah, I made a typo here. It still doesn't... Okay, I'm so sorry about this. So, I seem to have mixed up colons and commas in certain places. You want colons when you are setting options for an effect. You want commas when you're going to the next effect. Okay, so interpolate, that should be a comma. That should be, okay, so everything seems to be good now. So sorry about that. Just to be curious, let me see if HuffYUV offers, because that's also lossless. It does. Why don't I do that instead? Shouldn't be a big deal. But yeah, we'll change the codec to HuffYUV. That's also lossless. Might suit our purposes a little bit better. Now let's play this bad boy. So we can see that the logo is very small. It looks good otherwise. It's the right aspect ratio, colors and such. So that was just step one. Step one, resize the video. You don't have to do the same kind of motion upscaling that I did if you don't want to, but do make sure that the size is 160 by 144. Step two, we are going to generate a color palette. So The Game Boy Color allows for only 56 colors tops, but those 56 colors can be any of the 32,768 that exist in the 15-bit color space. So we're going to let FFmpeg analyze this video and choose 56 colors that are the best for this purpose. What we'll do is we'll FFmpeg scale and crop. So this is our smaller video. VF palette gen. So palette gen is going to generate by default a 256 color palette that best represents the input video. But we're going to change some options. We're going to set max colors to 56. So now we'll only get up to 56 colors. Reserve transparent equals false. If we don't do this, then it'll basically waste a color slot for transparency, and we're not using transparency. So we definitely want to make sure we have those options. We're going to set the pixel format to RGB 555LE. Now, the reason why we're doing this is because not only do we want 56 colors, but we want those 56 colors to be limited to the 15-bit color space. And this RGB 555LE is what does the limiting to the 32,768 colors that we can possibly have. So this is for the highest possible accuracy to the actual Game Boy. And this we're just going to call palette.bmp, because PNG doesn't support this pixel format. Why didn't it like that? Again with the colons. So it's going to say, oh, this isn't fully implemented. That's okay. It may complain about repeated colors. That's okay. The colors don't have to always be 56. They just have to be up to 56. So let's look at this color palette. So let's zoom in a lot, and we see that what the program decided to do is it decided to make a few shades of blue, which represents the background well, some lighter purples. We see some reds, a very dark green, so it doesn't look like every color is going to be represented very well, and that's okay. Part of this effect is the fact that it imposes some limitations on the videos. So once we use this palette, we'll see how it works out. Now you'll also notice a lot of this palette is red. Don't worry if the palette has a bunch of one color. The thing is, the palette use effect, which takes this color palette and actually maps the colors that we generated back onto the video, it doesn't care about how often the color appears in the color palette. It will always choose what it thinks is the best match. So when you limit the number of colors you're generating, you're going to get one color that sort of stands out as taking up most of the palette, because this would otherwise have been taken up by other colors if we hadn't limited ourselves to only 56. So we got some blues, we got some reds, we got some yellow, we got a working palette. We're going to now use this palette. Step 3, we're going to put the palette back on the video. We're going to FFmpeg our small video, scale and crop, and our palette are going to be our two inputs. LavFi I found is an arbitrary filter graph. It's the same as filter complex. So I could do filter complex if you wanted. It's the same thing. So let's move forward with LavFi. Palette use. Now, you could stop here if you wanted. However, it's a good idea to apply some additional settings to palette use to get a better quality. Usually what I do is this. dither equals Bayer. So dithering is essentially any kind of algorithm where when you are downsampling the number of colors that you have, you'll randomize the colors a little bit so that they end up averaging out overall to be more like your originals. A sort of extreme example of dithering is if you wanted to reproduce a gray image, but you only had black and white at your disposal. Well, you could just choose to use either black or either white. Or you could apply randomly black and white pixels over your whole image, and at a distance that would overall appear gray. Now, Bayer is a type of dithering algorithm which basically spreads colors out in a checkerboard pattern. And I find that this tends to give the best quality and also the best retro look. You can, however, use other dithering algorithms if you want to experiment with it. If you're using the Bayer algorithm, you also want to set Bayer scale. That's got to be a colon. Bayer scale controls how much of the checkerboard pattern is visible. If you set this to a lower number, there will be more visible pattern, but better color mixing. If you set it to a higher value, there will be less visible pattern, but worse color mixing. So I usually set this to the lowest possible value. Again, this is something you can play around with. For the sake of convenience, let's set the pixel format back to RGB 24. Because when we scale this up, it's going to be a big hassle if it's anything else. So we're going to call this downsampled. Why not? I think just to be safe, I'll also set all the same codecs and such. So the size is still going to be 160 by 144. The pixel format will be R60. What did I do up here? When I finally got that working. Okay. So that's all good. Pix format RGB 24, and CV will be puff YUV, and no audio, downsample.nkv. So that just applied the color palette that we made back onto the video. And let's give this a look-see. So you can see, it's a little bit hard to see because it's so small. If I increase the size, will it blur? Yeah, blurs. But you can still see, you know, there's this speckled pattern around the video. The colors aren't quite right anymore. And what's happening is that it's giving the 56 colors that we're given it is distributing them back onto the video the best it can. So it's re-representing all of the colors that were in the original video with just 56 colors. Now finally, to put the video together, we are going to upscale the video and we're going to apply our corner logo. So we'll FFmpeg, downsampled, and your corner logo. So this one, I am going to use the 0 and 1. So 0 in brackets means our first input, 1 in brackets means our second input. I am going to have to use these in this filter graph. So the first thing we need to do is we have to scale the video back up. I'm going to say, let's do W equals -1 and H equals 2160. So we're going to be rendering this, for this example, at 4K resolution. And as a little bit aside, I think maybe you guys have noticed that I've been rendering 4K videos instead of 8K videos. As much as I like to be ahead of the curve and I like to have really high quality videos for any display, 4K is just so much faster, so much easier to work with. My graphics card tends to like 4K much better than 8K, and you know, most displays only go up to 4K anyway, unless you're on a really fancy Mac. So I'm back to 4K. It's just easier for me. I hope people aren't too heartbroken. But in order to get the video to 4K quality, we first have to scale it up. So we're going to scale it up to a height of 2160, and the width is going to be -1, which means it'll set the width to whatever it should be to maintain the same aspect ratio. We don't need to do that calculation. This is the important part. Flags equals neighbor. FFmpeg has different ways to scale up the video. Typically, if you try to scale up a video that's really small quality, you will get blurry pixels because it'll try to blend the colors together. And it has other algorithms for increasing the quality. Flags equals neighbor usually is not what you want, because this just blows up the pixels into big squares. So if you want high quality video, that's going to look the worst. But we are trying to emulate the look and feel of an old display. So we do want to have big blocky pixels. Pad equals W equals 3840. So this is going to set the width to 3840, and it's going to pad the borders. And I will say that this is scaled, and then we'll do scaled 1 overlay. That should work. So this will be 3840 x 2160 -R60. I'll set the codec to LiveX 264 because a lossless video at this quality would be too big, and also this step would constitute the final step, so we don't have to worry about lossless video anymore. I'll set the preset to medium so we get decent quality. We're not doing audio. I don't think I need anything else. I guess I'll set the pixel format to YUV 420p. And I'll call this final.mp4. It's going to take some time to think about it. Now I will have to do a test play because I don't remember if pad centers the video for you. I think maybe it doesn't. Let's play this. Oh yeah, it sent it over there. Also, why is it so small? Okay, let's try that again. So I'm going to do all the same stuff. I'll manually set the width to the proper number. I think it's going to be 2400. 2160. Let me just do that calculation real quickly. $21.60 times 10 divided by 9 is 2400. Okay, now to center it, I believe we want to do 720, but let me check. 3840 minus 2400 divided by 2 is 720. Okay, so now we're going to center it. Everything else should be in order. And again with the commas. I do this more when I'm making tutorials than when I'm putting together videos on my own. Goodness. Okay, pad starts there. Okay. Yep, we're gonna... Just gotta think about it. And then we will play this. You know, I notice it's not taking in my logo. I know why it's not taking in my logo. Because I need to scale it first. We're going to scale this to width equals 3840, h equals 2160. You don't need to do this if your corner logo is already rendered at 4K resolution, but mine is rendered at 8K resolution. So we're going to replace, we'll let it go again. And let's see how this looks. There we go. There's my logo. So this looks like how we want it to. The squares are nice and big, they're crisp, they're not blurry, the colors are limited. This is looking very much like what we want. Now, I went through a series of steps using lossless video codecs to make things a little bit easier so you could see the individual steps. Where we prepared the logo first for the palette gen effect, we generated the palette, we used the palette, and we then applied our corner logo and we scaled up the video to the proper size. However, typically it's faster and better quality to do everything in one shot, or to do as much in one shot as you possibly can. So to finish off this tutorial, I am going to show you how you could get solely from the original video and your corner logo to an output in one FFmpeg line. We're going to do FFmpeg original corner. lavfi. This is the arbitrary filter graph. So 0 refers to our first input, that is original. What we're going to do here is all the stuff I did in the first step. So we're going to crop. I mean, again, you don't have to crop if you don't want to take out the edges, but you're going to do everything you did in the first step. Crop is 0.95 times IW. H equals 0.95 times IH. Scale equals W equals -1. H equals 144. And then crop equals W equals 160. So after all of this, we have gotten the video to the proper size. The proper size before we generate the palette. We're going to use the split filter. And split just takes a single input stream and separates it into two. So I'm going to call one G for palette gen and one U for palette use. You can use any name you want. So now I'm going to generate the palette. I'll take the video stream that I labeled G, and palette gen equals max colors equals 56, reserve transparent equals false, and then to set the pixel format, we're going to say format equals RGB 555 LE. and we'll call this P for palette. Then we're going to use the palette on the palette use stream. So we need U first, and then P. Make sure at this step that the video you're applying the palette to goes before the palette itself. Palette use equals dither equals Bayer, and Bayer scale equals 0. So now the palette should be applied. The output is a single stream. I'm going to set the format to RGB24 now. Even though it's not strictly necessary, I have found that if I don't set the format to RGB24 before I scale it up, when I do scale it up, sometimes it corrupts the colors. So do be safe. And before you scale up your videos, set the pixel format to something really high quality like RGB24. Scale equals W equals 2400, H equals 2160, flags equals neighbor. So now we're scaling it up, and we're going to pad it equals W equals 3840 and X equals 720. So we're setting the width to 3840 and we're pushing it to the left 720 pixels. And we'll call this Game Boy Color GBC, and then I'll scale my logo. Scale equals W equals 3840, H equals 2160. This will be logo, and then GBC, logo, overlay. We'll set the codec to H260 or WibeX 264, preset medium, 3840 by 2160, frame rate of 60. Oh, frame rate of 60. I almost forgot. Sorry to have to backtrack so much. Okay, before we split it, we're going to do the M interpolate. MI mode equals MCI. MC mode equals AOBMC. ME mode equals BIDER. VSBMC equals 1. Okay. Glad that's settled. SR, so, and then I'll set the final pixel format is going to be YUV 420p just because that's common. And I'll say one shot .mp4. Let's see what happens. It's complaining that it doesn't fully implement this pixel format. That's okay. So this is going to take a little bit longer just because we're doing everything, well, I don't want to say it's going to take longer. It's not going to take as long as all three of the previous steps combined, but it will take longer than the individual steps because it's doing everything at once. Let's see how one shot turned out. Exactly the way we wanted. Oh, and it put the audio in there. Okay, so everything's looking exactly the way it did before, but we did it all in one line. Now, I for one am really loving the FFmpeg filter graphs. I'm able to do so much more in a single command than I was able to do before with a series of lines. Now, I did say I wasn't going to do the audio effect today. I will just make a dummy command line so you can see what it would look like. I'm going to try. I don't think can I go up and down, or will it go through my history? Yeah, it's going to do that. Can I click with the mouse? Nope. Well, we got to do this the hard way. We got to scroll all the way. That is one downside of FFmpeg, is when you have a really long command line, got to scroll like crazy. So if you did have an audio file, you would probably do something like this. -I audio. And this could come off of a recording from a DSI, like I did in my chiptune effect, or it could just be some generic, old-timey bit crusher audio effect. And then, after you do this whole gobbledygook, I would just give this output a name, and then I'll say -map output -map 012. This should work. If it doesn't work, sometimes it complains about it. I just put a simple filter, a throwaway filter like a resample, and then I map the audio. So if you were so inclined, if you're so inclined, if you want to apply this effect, then you should have an audio file prepared that has some kind of old-timey effect. Just for the tutorial, I skipped it because I've already gone over the audio effect. So that, I think, covers it. I hope that the fact that I presented it in 2 different ways was helpful to you. Doing it in multiple steps, doing lossless video in between, is a good way if you are learning how to build the effect, to check that you're doing everything right. You can check that the video looks good at all of the intermediate steps before you move on to the next. But once you have it all figured out, I think it's a good idea to switch to using the one-line method, because the one-line method completely negates the issue of quality loss by saving and then reloading intermediate files. It shouldn't be too much of an issue if you use a lossless codec like HuffYUV or FFE1, but still, it is a little bit faster doing all of this processing in memory, because even if you don't have quality loss, encoding the video and then reloading the video does take time itself. That being said, however you want to go about doing this effect, it's totally up to you. Anytime I share my effects, I'm not trying to push people to do it in a certain way. I really want people to see how I did it in case you want to replicate it, but I also encourage people to try new things with it. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, I hope you all have a good day.